What? Nintendo PlayStation by Sony? I didn't even know they like collabed like that, bro. Why Nintendo make such small cartridge? I don't know. I've been thinking about this recently. A lot of games are either going digital or they have a disc. You know what I mean? I don't know what the deal is with the cartridges and why are they so little? I don't know, it's kind of fun. If you guys want to check out this full video, it's by The Gamer. I'll have it linked down in the description below, but without further ado, let's get into it.
Why are Nintendo Switch cartridges so small?
Seems really simple
on the surface. Many gamers consider cartridges to be outdated technology, which makes sense considering we tend to associate cartridges with the days of the N64. In the case of the Nintendo Switch, Nintendo didn't really have a choice but to go with game cards. Let's be honest, discs don't work well for portable
PSP.
consoles.
Yeah, I was gonna say they have to show the PSP.
Use universal media discs.
The PSP, you could like feel it spinning in there.
They were already in their own little casing, so they weren't true discs like we see in home consoles.
And the discs for the PlayStation, dude, those PSP discs were like large. Like they weren't little. Like the PSP was smaller than the Switch. This was like half the size of the Switch. But those discs were huge. I remember I had a PSP and I only had like 5 games because I was like, I don't really have a good way to store these, so that makes sense.
The connector pins on the game cards are much more difficult to scratch than the underside of a disc. And they're simply just sturdier than discs.
Up to this point, like, I just, like, thought that was, like, a tradition thing for Nintendo. They're like, we've used cartridges for our whole lives, and our great-grandpappy has used cartridges, so we're gonna keep using the cartridges. But if they actually legitimately work better, all the better, okay? If you had, like, a disc, like they did for the GameCube, like the GameCube, the Wii. Actually, you know what? I wasn't really that into I never owned a Wii, but the GameCube, I remember those discs. I was definitely always a little more careful with those GameCube discs than I was with, you know, like the Game Boy cartridges or the Nintendo 64 carts.
Switch game cards are smaller than Game Boy and Nintendo DS cartridges, but due to the advancements in technology over the years, they have a larger
I also didn't realize PS Vitas were so similar as well to the Switch.
These game cards are non-writable, but instead of the save data being stored in the game cards themselves, it's saved in the console's
that's an interesting note. So that is a very, very interesting note because all of the game cards that you have are literally just to access the game. It's not like how on the Game Boy, you can plug in your Pokemon game and it saves the save file onto the actual cartridge. You can't save anything on those. So if you didn't have like storage on your actual Switch, you wouldn't be able to like progress in any story or anything because it wouldn't be able to save the information.
You'd have to bring your own Switch with you to do so, which is different from the Nintendo DS and 3DS game
3DS,
cards that are
Game
writable
Boy.
and are able to...
I literally have never seen a micro SD inside of a DS. Am I an old person? Oh my god, wait a minute. Like, I've actually never seen a micro SD built into a DS cart like that. Anyway, I wonder how much more it would have costed or how much more sophisticated you need those cartridges to be able to write on them. Because it seems like for a $60 game, they'd be able to add it in there.
One interesting fact about the game cards is that they're coated with denatonium benzoate.
Denatonium benzoate, everyone's favorite chemical. I was gonna say, if they made a video on Nintendo Switch cartridges and they didn't mention that they made them taste bad, I was gonna have a problem, but I'm glad they brought it up. So that's the name of the chemical that they put on it, denatonium benzoate, so that when you lick it or if a child puts it in their mouth, it tastes bad, so they don't want to eat it. Don't be acting like you've never licked your Nintendo Switch cartridges before.
Well, there are no cartridges bigger than 32 gigabytes. 64 gigabyte cartridges were planned to be introduced in 2018, but Nintendo delayed the launch of them to 2019 before delaying it once again until sometime in the year 2020. Which we wouldn't be surprised at all if that gets delayed again, considering everything else going on.
Yeah, dude, 2020's been a year. It's weird because 64 gigs for one single game seems pretty extreme. But, I mean, given that the most recent Call of Duty Warzone was like 100 gigabytes to download onto my PlayStation, I guess I can actually see how games are getting this big. But at the same time, I'm surprised that this technology, like as fast as everything else in tech is moving, I'm surprised that there wasn't like an easy upgrade for this. Because now, you can fit 500 gigabytes onto a micro SD. If you can get 500 gigabytes of storage onto that, why can't you get 64 onto a cart that's this size? I don't know anything about software or hardware, I just enjoy the games. You remember when they had like VHSs and tapes? When they had like audio tapes, VHSs, and then they had discs and you can play your stuff on CDs, and then you started being able to put your stuff on like MP3 players, and now we're here.
The only reason the Sony PlayStation even exists is because of the disagreement between Nintendo and Sony over the Super NES CD-ROM system add-on for the Super Nintendo.
They had beef?
They got into a disagreement over the rights and licensing of the discs.
What?
Sony
I didn't even know they like collabed like that, bro. Nintendo PlayStation by Sony? How is that? Okay, literally, how is a video about tiny Nintendo cartridges enlightening me on the fact that Nintendo and PlayStation worked on a console together? Why is this like a history lesson for me as well? The Philips console real quick. But in one of our recent videos, we did a review of like game console sales over the decades, over the years, and Sony out of nowhere with the PlayStation just took off running and sold so many units. So I'm wondering if Nintendo and Sony would have gone through with that collab, how would that have ended out for both of those companies, really? Because Nintendo, like, they're still doing well, but Sony, spoiler for that video, Sony ended up passing them and they were like way gone. Like, they sold so many more units, but like, I think it's also because they've had a few more successful consoles. They've made a lot along the way, but I'd just be curious to see where both of those companies would have ended up if they would have gone through with this deal. We probably wouldn't even be having this conversation at all right now, especially because Nintendo is still using cartridges.
Nintendo only chose to go with these mini discs because, since they weren't the size of a typical optical disc, they were better at preventing copyright infringement, and they cost less to produce compared.
They were worried about people making copies of the. I guess that's fair. It's just something that a gamer does not normally think about. Like, I've never bought in a game that wasn't from like the actual distributor. You know what I mean? Like, I've never bought a bootleg game that somebody burned, which I guess is probably exactly why, because they were trying to prevent that from happening. But it's interesting that they switched over to those mini discs for the GameCube, and then they later resorted back to cartridges when it was a viable option again, when it was like okay and feasible to do so, because the Wii also had discs, full-size ones.
It was very interesting for Nintendo to go to discs for a while, but as you all know, they're now back to teeny tiny game cards for the Switch out of sheer necessity. It may seem backwards, but cartridges have much more advanced technology in them than you'd think.
I was hoping in this they were going to touch more on the actual technology that makes the cartridge better. It really just seems like it's like more similar to like a solid state drive, or like some kind of like actual drive that doesn't move, whereas the game disc is spinning, the cart stays still, you can take it with you on the go, it won't break. I don't think anybody sees cartridges as outdated when so many people use SD cards and micro SD cards and phones and cameras, which are basically the same thing. I have to admit, I was like curious as to why they didn't go over to discs, but after watching this, like, it legitimately makes sense. Like, they're right. Like, having any kind of like cart such as the micro SD, the SD card, like, that's like the same thing. It's just reading directly from that cart instead of from something that's spinning and moving and has to go over the sensor. Like, it actually seems like it would be faster. Why Nintendo make small cartridges? Look at the size of the Switch. What do you want? Discs? That makes sense. Because yeah, once again, like, the PSP discs were so large that it's like, that's just like an uncomfortable size. I can have like 10 Nintendo Switch carts in a thing like that, like really small, and just carry all of them with me wherever I go. You can't do that with other discs, especially because you have to protect them, like they were saying. Why not ask, why is the cartridge retail case 24 times larger than the game? That is a very, very good question, Jacob. It's honestly like a placement thing in the store, because if you make the game box smaller, they're gonna get less space on the shelf, and then people are gonna notice it less because it's so small and you can't see it. I think they're gonna keep making those boxes significantly larger than the actual game cart until everything just goes digital, or until other companies start making their boxes smaller. Who hasn't tasted those nasty boys? Am I the weird one for not doing that? Honestly, at this point, yes. It's one of those reverse psychology things for sure. I think you need to give one a good lick. Let me know what you guys think about this down in the comment section below. I'm curious to see what you guys have to say. Also, if you have any suggestions for other videos you'd like to see me react to, feel free to leave those in the comments. Once again, we'll have this video in the description if you want to check it out. If you want to watch through the whole thing without me voicing my opinion on top of it, I don't know. Either way, Nintendo, keep doing you, honey. Don't listen to those other companies with their fancy discs and whatnot. Cartridges are still great. They still taste gross. That's all we can ask for. So thank you all so much for kicking it with me on this fine day, and we will see you guys next time. Bye!